Another thing about Biden's tax plan is the step-up basis, which is sometimes called the death tax. So when that might go away,
And that could be huge.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Pillars of Wealth Creation, where we talk about creating financial success with a special focus on business and real estate. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Now, let's get to it. Hello and welcome back to Pillars of Wealth Creation. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. With me, as always, we got Matt Jones. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. How are you doing, Todd?
I'm doing great. And by the way, if those of you who didn't catch it, our last episode, we talked about Matt's book, a book about real estate. So if you haven't bought your copy yet, you can buy your copy. You said it's on Amazon, and you can go directly to your website. Check that out. So check out the book, I think, and listen to our episode just last week where I actually interviewed Matt, and he talked a bit about the book, about why he wrote it, a bit about some of the hardships of writing it, the successes of writing it, and then just gave us a little fairly brief kind of cap of the book and what it details. But that's not what we're talking about today. So Matt, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, so we're recording this on Thursday, January 7th. So we just found out about the results from Georgia with their Senate race, and surprise, the Democrats are going to hold the Senate. So we had an episode back in November where we were talking about Biden's tax plan, and we were not expecting the Republicans to lose the Senate. So we weren't really optimistic that, or we weren't really thinking that that Biden was going to get any of his tax things passed in regards to real estate. But now it seems like that, some of those might actually come to pass. And so we're going to talk about what that means and what to expect and, how to feel about it, I suppose.
Yeah. And before you just hit the stop button here and say, I don't want to listen to a bunch of political, banter. That's not what I'm tuning into. No. We're going to relate this to real estate, and we're not going to try to get too crazy political because, I don't know. That's just not what the show's about. I could tell you all about my views, and Matt, you could tell everybody about your views, but that's not what we're going to do. We're going to try to look at what this could do for the economy, for real estate, and maybe even how can we look at our business to make sure we're taking advantage of whatever situation comes down the line, because that's the most important thing, right? You might be cheering, yelling up and down, saying this is the greatest thing ever. There's this balance shift, and now we're going to be able to pass a bunch of legislation that you favor, or you might be going, this is terrible. I didn't want this to happen, and worst thing that could have happened. So either way, you've got to look at it and go, okay, but how can I take whatever result happened? Because that was kind of out of your control, right? You maybe went in and hopefully you voted, but beyond that, it's really out of your control. You can vote, you can donate money, you can show up and help support the candidates you want. But at the end of the day, it's not really in your control. But what is in your control is the actions that you take and the mindset that you have from now through this minimum of 2-year period of time, right? And by the way, Matt, this has happened before we hit record, and we didn't fact check this. So if anybody's listening and you can fact check me, but I believe that when Trump took over, the Republicans held the House and the Senate. And I believe when Obama took over, or within his term, the Democrats held the House and Senate. And I believe sometime during Bush's term, sometime during Clinton's term, the same thing happened. And so this isn't brand new. It's not like this has ever happened before, and America as we know it is ending. It's kind of to be expected, actually. Now, back when we talked about it before, I don't think you and I expected it. At least I didn't. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong about you.
I did not expect the Democrats to win either.
First of all, it was in Georgia, right? Georgia's typically a red state. And second of all, we saw the results of the Georgia Senate election, and the Republicans clearly won both of them. But according to Georgia rules, they didn't, because they didn't get the right amount of support. I think it was 50%. Yep. Is that right? 50? Okay. They needed 50% or greater. So they didn't get that. But when you looked at it, you went, oh, geez, yeah, but they clearly beat the Democrat person. And so for sure, when they got this re-election or this runoff, they're going to win, right? But obviously we saw that didn't happen. And my guess is because, well, it was one versus before it was a Republican, Democrat, there was some independents, there were some other Republicans and Democrats. So votes were going a lot of different places. So it was really interesting. Anyways, so let's dive into how does this affect your real estate, and how can we maybe, look at this in a positive light on our business and move in a direction that we might be able to improve our business. So Matt, go ahead. Why don't you start us off? What do you think, any changes that may happen that is going to directly affect real estate?
Well, one positive change, I think, the first time buyer tax break for new homeowners, that's probably going to go up to $15,000. So just about doubling from where it was before. So that means that more people are going to buy single family houses. So if you're in the single family house investment world, this means that you'll have more buyers to sell your properties to.
So good for home buyers. Probably a slight negative for landlords.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. What else? Anything else?
Yeah. So there are the 1031 exchanges. I think that's the one thing that I kind of worry about the most out of the things, if the 1031 exchange might go away.
Yeah.
And if that happens, then I think that people will just have to adjust their investment strategies. I think in the last episode where we talked about this, you mentioned that people are going to be holding on to their properties more or for a longer period of times. And that, when people are doing 1031s right now, they're more likely to be willing to pay more for a property. So if there aren't any 1031s, then likely the prices might go down a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, potentially. And I think it would be more of a short-term thing too. Maybe it will have some long-term ramifications, but I don't think a ton. Honestly, when you look at, I think the majority of companies out there are likely, maybe not the majority. There's a good portion of companies out there that are not doing 1031 exchanges. They can't for whatever reason, because likely because they have a syndication or a syndication type model, a fund type model. Very hard to 1031 exchange those properties. Not impossible, but very difficult to do. A lot of times it makes more sense to take the tax hit. You've got then a lot of cases of people that are retiring, people that want to be out of the business. So I would be interested to see, and maybe there's a stat out there that we could quick look up, what percentage of multifamily real estate is done through a 1031 exchange. I know when I'm competing on properties, the vast majority of my competition is not 1031 exchanges. Very rarely do I hear about somebody beat me out because they were doing a 1031 exchange. That's usually only when you hear about it, right? It was somebody beat you out. You're like, oh, it was because of a 1031 exchange. It's happened to me, but not very often. And I've put offers in on a lot of properties. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of properties. And I bet it's only happened, I mean, not even a handful of times where I was told that the buyer was ultimately a 1031 buyer. So I think is it going to affect real estate? I definitely think it would. Is it a massive game changer? Probably not. I think it'll have knee-jerk ramifications, knee-jerk reactions. People, where you'll see a lot of people prior to that legislation gets passed, because everything takes a long time, right? They'll start talking about it, they'll pass it, but the law won't be enacted for a long time. So we'll have plenty of time to get our 1031 exchange done. I think you'll see a lot of people going to sell, and that might negatively affect prices. But a lot of people, I'm not so sure, because then a lot of people are trying to buy, right? So you're going to have sell, driving prices down, buy, driving prices up. So it might just be more of an even keel. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens there.
And you had a great point about the timing of the laws passing. It's not like day one that Biden's in the office that everything's going to pass. It takes time to put laws together and for the debates and challenges and things like that to happen. And then after a law passes, there's usually a delay between when it actually takes effect. So, and also you were mentioning earlier about how it's not unusual for one party to hold all three houses, or like the House, the Senate, and the presidency. But another thing that's pretty common is that midterm for that to change. So maybe the Republicans will take back the Senate in a couple of years. I don't know.
Yeah.
And if that happens, then that could potentially halt any changes there. And if the Republicans win back,
well, it is, so it's only 2 years, right? And it seems like it seems like it's not just likely to happen. Like it seems like it just happened. Like every time it happens, I don't know. And I don't pay super close attention to politics. That's just not what I get into. Some people, that's their jam. Me, it's not. But it feels like that happens more often than not, where it's just the transfer, happens. And so probably this is a 2-year deal. Maybe it's longer, but probably it's a 2-year deal.
Yeah, I don't know. I know the
2 to 4
Republicans
years
have more seats up for re-election in 2022 in the Senate than the Democrats. So I don't know what'll happen, but
sure,
just have to wait and see.
Sure. Yeah, we'll wait and see. But right now we know what's going on. We know that honestly, it's even, right? It's 50-50, but the Democrats hold the control because of the presidency, the vice president. And then the House became much more even as well. The Democrats hold the control of it, but it's a pretty slim margin right now. So I think that also probably plays a little bit of factor into how much control they really have, how much can they really pass. They're going to be able to pass everything, or maybe not everything, but a lot of things that are moderate, but to pass things that are very left-sided, I think. And that's a fear, I think, of a lot of people is, oh my gosh, now we're going to become socialist. Well, to be able to pass extremely socialist acts is going to be a lot harder because they don't have, they're not completely dominating everything.
Yeah. And there certainly are very far left people in Congress right now, but the majority of people are not really to the extreme of socialism or communism. So I
think the parties, and this is maybe getting too far into politics, but I think the parties are very little difference between the two. When you're looking at the majority of politicians, there's very few differences until you go to the outsides of the parties. Like you said, you've got some far lefts, you've probably got some far rights, although I can't think of any, but yeah, I'm sure that you have some. But most people are in the middle. So another thing that's going to be what I think will happen is we'll be passing this extra stimulus, right? There was the $600 stimulus, but my guess is when Biden comes in, there's going to be a quick push to pass the $2,000 stimulus, maybe even more. So I would say expect another check in your piggy bank if you're not making a ton of money. Or it's actually a pretty good portion even, but expect a check in your piggy bank. how is that going to affect our economy? Well, that's controversial, right? We don't really know the answer because we know short term, obviously, it's good for the economy. Short term, it's going to boost people's income. It's going to make, people spend more money. That's going to, people are going to be able to pay their rent, home mortgages, I'll go on a shopping spree, travel, whatever. And so that's going to juice the economy. And it's going to positively affect businesses. It's going to positively affect everything. We know that short term. The long term is the real risk of what's happening. And we could talk for a long time about theory and what that's going to do. And I feel like printing money is never a good thing. That's just my belief. I have heard other people say that there's going to be very little effect, and that we've learned how to basically print money and deal with it and move our economy forward. And so I've heard from economists both ways. I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens. But short term, I think it's pretty easy to say short term, it is going to boost the economy.
Yep, most likely.
And I would think short term as well. It's not only going to boost the economy, it's probably going to increase house prices. It's likely going to increase rents. It's likely going to increase stability in multifamily. So likely short term, it's going to have positive impacts upon most business owners. Maybe not to a degree where everybody gets equal amount of positive benefits, right? But it is definitely going to boost the economy short term. I would just kind of, be paying attention to long term.
If you're exploring the different ways to invest in real estate, then you got to check out my new book called Book About Real Estate. It summarizes, reviews, and condenses over 20 top real estate books to help give you an understanding of the full spectrum of real estate investing very quickly. So buy it today on Amazon by searching for Book About Real Estate by Matt Jones.
I'm not a big advocate, Matt, I don't watch the news a ton, but I am an advocate of staying on top of what's going on to an extent. So I try not to get captured into the media frenzy, because the media has an agenda. The media's agenda is to sell, right?
Sell ads.
They're advertisers. That's just it. They're advertisers. And whether you think they have a right or left leaning agenda, I don't really care. They have an agenda, and the agenda is to sell. And so I try not to get too caught up in that, but to just be informed of kind of what's going on, what legislation is passing, and how I can then make that a positive impact on my business. And if it's going to be a complete negative to my business, how can I pivot? How can I, change? Maybe it is a sale, but where can then I buy? Where can then I pivot? So we have to look at that and how can we increase and grow our business.
Yeah. And we've talked about that many times. Regardless of where you are in real estate, pivoting, adapting to changes is the key to success. And things are always changing.
Yep. I think the biggest thing, there's a lot of fear out there, and people fear change. Ultimately, you've got to look at what are you in control of, and you're in control of yourself. You're in control of how your mindset is. You're in control of your business, and that's what you can affect. That's what you can control. So that's what you need to be focusing on.
Yeah. So one thing I would not be surprised about with Biden is if the eviction moratoriums continue. And I don't know how long they would continue, but for probably through the fall is my best guess, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I could see that. Hopefully not through the fall, but yeah, I could see them going on for a considerable amount of time. Now, that obviously only affects certain people, right? most of, I shouldn't say most of, a good chunk of my properties, it doesn't affect at all because it's on the federal level. It's not all evictions. We're evicting people in our properties right now, even though there's an eviction moratorium, because those are on federally backed loans, right? Those are on Fannie, Freddie, HUD loans. They're not on local bank loans, So if you've got a loan and on a rental property and it's with Fannie, Freddie, HUD, yeah, you can't evict. But if you've got a loan and it's with, ABC Bank down the road, then you can evict still. So just make sure you know what's going on, know the law. Obviously, you can't evict people if you have that federally backed loan. But if it's not federally backed, depending on your state, you can still evict. Now, in the state of Minnesota, we can't evict no matter what because of our governor. Now, I could see our governor continuing until the fall as well. But I have properties in Kentucky and in Wisconsin, and we can evict.
Yep.
Ohio.
Yeah. And I would say, there are ways around that too. With the even if you can't evict, you can still do cash for keys, and I've done more of that, during COVID right now, with some success. So
I'm happy to report that we had a tenant that was way behind on rent, and we were able to get a check from the government for almost $9,500. Now, that didn't cover everything he was behind. It covered from March through the end of November. He hasn't paid December in January. And he had a lot of late fees that we had to drop. All the late fees. The government wasn't going to pay for that. He had some other fees. He had some fees based on just like trash removal fees, stuff like that we had to drop in order to take the money. So, but they are stepping in and paying for that. Whether I agree with that or not is another story. But the money came to me. It was nice to be able to recoup nearly $9,500 that we haven't been able to collect since March.
And how did that work to get that check?
So the state of Minnesota released a bunch of funds, and you had to apply for it. And so I applied on my tenant's behalf. The tenant had to, how was it? The tenant had to sign a statement, I believe it was, on this one. I can't recall exactly. I know we've done it a few times, and this is the only one that we've got to go through. But yeah, so we had to apply for that, and it actually went relatively quickly. It was only about a month from when we applied to when we got it. Month and a half.
Good. Well, I'm glad he was willing to sign that. It just goes to show you that communicating with your tenants and treating them with respect is going to mean that they're going to be more likely to work with you. And
yeah, cash for keys, like you said, though, that's another way. Obviously painful, right? Because you're paying somebody that hasn't paid you to move out of your property, and that's like, oh, really? I got to pay you to get out of my property, but yet you owe me money. But you also have to look at, this is a business. This is, you got to try to keep your emotions out of it. You got to try to keep your belief systems out of it as much as you can. And you're looking at making sure you can survive in your business. And so if you want to get the most amount of income out of your business, sometimes it's just best to pay to get somebody out, to get somebody in that's going to actually pay you.
Yep.
So,
and I actually didn't even offer any cash. I just waived their late fees and their
that would be the
money
first
that they owed, and
that'd be the first step, right? You just say, hey, look, you move, I waive all your fees, just, and I won't give you I won't give you an eviction when that time comes. Like, let's just wash our hands. First steps. We actually had to pay somebody a substantial amount of money to move.
Hmm.
So happens.
Yep, that's all right. So another thing about Biden's tax plan is the step-up basis, which is sometimes called the death tax. So when that might go away,
and that could be huge.
Yeah, that could be huge as well. So trying to make generational wealth for your family ongoing, that really puts a kink in things.
Yeah,
if that passes.
Yeah. So basically, what you can do right now in real estate, which is really cool if you're looking to build legacy wealth, is I could buy a building, I could sell it, 1031 it, no, pay no taxes. I could then, and now I have this new building, and I could sell that, make a bunch of money, 1031 that, and I could keep on doing that. So I could start with a duplex and get to a 500 unit building, or maybe several buildings before I die. And then I die. And what happens is immediately then my family could sell that building or those buildings, and then we get taxed $0. So we paid no taxes from day one on all the profits that we made. So maybe we made $10 million and we pay $0 in taxes. Right now, that's possible. If that's removed, you would pay probably 40% would go to the government, depending on what state you lived in and whatever, all that kind of stuff. Maybe anywhere between 20 to 40%, depending on where you live. So big difference, obviously, for legacy wealth builders. Not a big difference for the large majority of Americans, right? But it is a big difference for the wealthy.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people that want to tax the wealthy more, want them to pay the lion's share of taxes, and so this would be one way for that to happen.
And I think there are ways around that. I highly recommend seeing a tax professional about that. But putting the properties into a trust control before you die, and then having your children take over that trust. That's just sort of a loophole in there.
But I don't think they could sell the building and not pay the taxes, though. They could hold the building and they'd be fine. But I don't think they could sell the building, even if it's in a trust. But yeah, I'm not sure what the exact tax loopholes is, but I'm sure there's other tax loopholes that if one is completely closed, another one might be an option. Maybe not quite as good, but it might be another viable option.
Mm-hmm. And I think Biden will also pass, increasing taxes on the higher income earners.
Yep.
So, I mean, the way around that is just to hide your money, I suppose.
Buy more real estate.
Legally hide your money by buying more real estate.
Yeah. I mean, look, unless he gets rid of depreciation, just keep on buying more real estate. Every year you got to buy another deal and you can depreciate. And then you're going to legally not show as much income. Mm-hmm. So now if he gets rid of depreciation, well, then that's a different story.
Yeah, I don't think he's planning on getting...
I don't think that's even been talked about.
Yeah, I know it was talked about, like the bonus depreciation that was allowed, that Trump brought in. But so that might go away potentially. But regular depreciation, I don't think is on the table.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think that's been really talked about. So cool. Anything else?
Yeah, that's, I guess, the main stuff. Just overall, like we said, even if all of this stuff passes, you can still adjust. You can still, change your strategy to still make a lot of money. Real estate is still going to be very profitable under Biden or whoever else. And even if some changes happen that we don't like, the Republicans are going to get control sooner or later, and they could change it right back.
Well, and here's the deal with real estate is that we talk about this stimulus money that's already passed. We talk about the stimulus money that's coming. And what we know from history is if that does anything, it leads to inflation. And real estate is a great hedge against inflation, right? One of the best hedges against inflation. I think the best, because not only does it hedge against inflation because it increases in value when inflation happens, but it also provides you cash flow, right? So you've got two things. You've got the cash flow, which gold does not give you, and you've got the tangible asset, which increases in value when inflation happens. So I think we're going to see probably inflation. I mean, when you look at it, the last time we didn't see a lot of inflation, but we saw asset inflation, right? And I think that's going to happen again. So buy real estate.
Great advice.
All right, man. Hopefully we didn't get too political for everybody. I just wanted to give a breakdown of kind of where we see things, but look for opportunities. There's going to be opportunities within this, and let's stay optimistic. Let's stay positive. I know there's a lot of emotions rolling right now. Obviously, there's a lot of emotions happening right now, but let's stay positive and figure out how can we best move forward, whether you are super excited about the change or whether you're not. Let's figure out how we can best move forward, and let's do it together.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Make every day Saturday. See ya. Hey, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you being a loyal listener. I would love to have you go on to our Facebook page and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Go on to iTunes or wherever you listen and give us a rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe. Your rating and review just helps us push this out to more and more people and continue to grow our audience and hopefully positively affect a ton of people out there that really need this and want this. So the other thing I've got for you is a free ebook on my website. So go on to venturedproperties.com, and download our free ebook on real estate and on syndication. And I've got some data points in there, some really good stuff for you. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. It's free. I'm not expecting anything from it. And also, look, if you want some help in multifamily, want some help learning, growing, getting your business off the ground, I would love to talk to you about what it would look like to work with me potentially and see if that's a good fit. So you can go to coachwithdex.com and check that out, and we can definitely have a call. Thanks a lot for listening. You make it a fantastic rest of the day. I'll catch you on the next episode.